A young guy dropped out of university and started working on a construction site to help his family. But when the CEO of the company noticed him, Villa Ascend, the Velasquez family's cozy nest, was situated away from the city center. It was built in the Moorish style, blending features of Spanish and North African cultures. The house had a spacious inner courtyard where neatly laid tiles transitioned smoothly into a green lawn. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a small fountain, creating an atmosphere of peace and comfort. Adding to the decor were neatly trimmed greenery and oval, ivory-colored tables with soft chairs. The Velasquez family loved to gather here for family dinners and long conversations. This is where Rogelio found his family, his father Alberto, his mother Lucia, and his younger sister Anna. The father was sitting in a soft chair, attentively reading the evening newspaper. Rodriguez's stocks have fallen again. His business is really not doing well, he said, without taking his eyes off the newspaper article. Maybe you could help him? You're quite influential in the city. After all, you head the construction department, said Lucia, who always took others' problems to heart. This quality was reflected in her appearance. She was a fair-haired, very lovely woman who endeared herself to everyone. I'll think about it, her husband replied matter-of-factly. All this time, Lucia was fussing over the table, setting it for dinner. Helping her was 13-year-old Anna, who was being raised as a model homemaker. Mother and daughter skillfully and knowledgeably set the table, and it was clear they were doing an excellent job. All the cutlery was in its place, and the napkins were beautifully arranged. Good evening, Rogelio said. No one had noticed him come in during their conversation. Son, you're back already? Just in time, Lucia said. Her voice was filled with boundless love for this dark-haired young man. He, in turn, had inherited the expressive features of her face. Well-defined eyes, full lips, and a neat nose made him quite attractive to the fairer sex. Son, how was your day? His father asked, businesslike. He embodied masculine confidence, assured, firm, reliable. He wasn't as handsome as his wife, but this didn't affect his inner qualities. I had an interview at the university today. I think my knowledge impressed the committee, the young man said confidently. Never get ahead of yourself. Wait until they tell you you've been accepted before you start boasting. Everything you said now is just speculation. Alberto, as always, steered the family conversation constructively. Oh, come on, Alberto. Rogelio is very smart, and I think his words are quite true. You'll see, I'm right, Lucia responded. Alberto grunted in response. He didn't like it when his wife commented on his words, but his politeness prevented him from making a remark. Let's have dinner already. I'm starving, Anna suggested. Of course, everyone agreed and sat down at the table. The next morning was promising. Today, the student admission lists were to be posted. Rogelio had been in a state of great emotional agitation since the morning. It was noticeable. He kept dropping things and couldn't focus on anything. Do you want some kind of sedative? Lucia was preparing breakfast in the kitchen and couldn't help but notice her son's condition. Yes, probably. His mother immediately started looking for the medicine in the cupboard. He gulped down some dark liquid from a beaker that Lucia had prepared and winced at its bitterness. I'm off, the young man said, quickly throwing on a light jacket and rushing to the door. What about breakfast? His mother called after him, but he didn't hear her. In the university foyer, applicants were already crowding around the admission lists. Rogelio didn't rush to approach and waited for the crowd to thin out a bit. When there were significantly fewer people, he got closer to the stand and started looking for his name. Velasquez Rogelio, he said aloud. What did you say? Asked a girl standing nearby. Rogelio Velasquez, student of the Faculty of Economics, he shouted loudly enough for everyone around to turn. His face expressed complete delight, and everyone understood the reason for his boundless joy. Nice to meet you, Rogelio Velasquez. I'm Angela Gassiero, also a student of the Faculty of Economics. The girl extended her hand in greeting. But Rogelio was so overwhelmed with emotions that he picked her up like a feather. Luckily, the girl was tiny, like Thumbelina, and started spinning her as if he had met an old friend. Angela didn't resist. She was filled with the same emotions, though she skillfully hid them under a mask of modesty and propriety. Rogelio wanted to savor his newfound joy for as long as possible. Moreover, the day was very warm and sunny, so there was no reason to hurry home so early. "Are we going the same way?" he heard a thin girlish voice behind him as he left the university building. Rogelio turned around and saw the same girl he had spun in the university foyer a few minutes ago. He was a bit embarrassed because the emotions that had overwhelmed him a few minutes ago had subsided, and he could finally see this petite girl. She seemed so tiny that it was no wonder he had lifted her so easily back then. Her blonde curls, like sunbeams, stuck out in different directions. She wore round glasses with thin frames, through which lively, wide-open blue eyes looked at him with interest. "Remind me, what's your name?" Rogelio asked. "Angela," the girl replied calmly. "Oh, right," the young man smacked his forehead as if he knew but had forgotten her name. In fact, he hadn't heard it the first time. "So, are we going the same way?" Angela asked again. "I think so," Rogelio replied playfully and took her hand. The girl seemed quite amusing to him, and he wanted to get to know her better. The young people walked along the promenade like old friends. The cool sea breeze blew on them, and they occasionally stopped under sprawling palm trees to escape the hot sun. Alberto was sitting in the back seat of a Volkswagen, having a business conversation on the phone. It was a premium-class car, one of the latest modifications from the German manufacturer. His personal driver was behind the wheel. "Ignazio, I'm running late. Can you go faster?" the boss said nervously. "Sir, there's a heavy traffic ahead. I can't overtake them." "You know how difficult it can be to get anywhere at this time of day," the driver replied, sounding as if he wanted to caution his employer. "You know I have an important meeting that I can't be late for." "It's not in my nature," Senor Alberto was adamant. He straightened his expensive gray jacket, which he had specifically worn for the business meeting. Ignazio, who had worked with him for several years, understood that this meeting was truly important. He pressed harder on the gas pedal and tried to overtake the cars ahead. The traffic was indeed heavy, and he couldn't overtake anyone. He had to return to his lane. But just a moment later, Ignazio attempted to speed ahead again. And, oh my God! A truck was right in front of him. The sound of brakes, a terrible crash, and the screech of metal, the unthinkable had happened. Despite his driving experience, Ignazio lost control, and the Volkswagen ended up under the truck's wheels in a matter of seconds. There was no chance of surviving this deadly encounter. Senor Alberto was trapped in the back seat. He was covered in blood. A crowd quickly gathered around the car, and passing cars started to slow down to see if any help was needed. The sirens of ambulances and police cut through the noise of the horrifying scene. Rescuers were also arriving. "Quick, quick, he's still breathing," someone in the crowd shouted, and the medics immediately rushed to the wrecked car. The front part of it was under the truck. The rear was crushed, so the rescuers had to work to get to the unconscious Alberto. He was pinned by the front seat, his head thrown back. Scarlet blood was streaming down his face, with some visible bruises. Finally, after working with their tools, the rescuers opened access to the car's interior. But there was no way to get the man out. He was trapped between the front and back seats. The work had to continue, but more delicately. Time was of the essence. The man remained unconscious. "Guys, can you hurry up?" The medics tried to speed up the process. So far, they hadn't had any chance to get close to Alberto to check his condition. "We're doing everything we can," grumbled a bearded man who was trying to free Alberto's legs from the twisted metal. Finally, there was an opportunity to extract the man from the car. The medics immediately loaded him into the ambulance and headed to the hospital. "Rogelio, where have you been? I called you several times, But you didn't answer any of my calls. A tearful Lucia met her son at the entrance, as she had been waiting for him for a long time. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes were filled with tears. "Well, I'm an adult. Why are you so worried about me?" "Everything's fine." The son hugged his mother and tried to calm her down. "You don't know. Something happened." Lucia tried to hold back her anxiety, but her voice trembled. "Mom? Father was in an accident. He's in the hospital now. No one is allowed to see him, and they aren't saying anything." "Son, I don't know what to think." After these words, she cried and buried her face in his right shoulder. "The main thing is that he's alive. Don't cry. I'll go there." Rogelio pushed his mother away and quickly headed for the exit. "No one is allowed to see him, son," Lucia shouted after him. But he didn't hear her anymore. A worried Rogelio rushed into the hospital where his father was. "I'm the son of Alberto Velasquez. Where can I see my father?" he asked the nurse at the reception desk. Just a moment, the young girl started looking for the name that Rogelio had mentioned in the list. "Yes, found it. Alberto Velasquez is in intensive care. He had surgery and is now under the doctor's supervision. Can I see him?" "I think that question can only be answered by his attending physician," the nurse said. "Senor Gonzalez is in his office. You'll be escorted there." "It's too early to make any predictions or say anything specific." The doctor looked closely at Rogelio over his glasses, which had slipped to the very tip of his nose. Senor Gonzalez was an experienced surgeon, so every word he said reflected the real situation. Rogelio had no reason not to believe this gray-haired man. "I'd like to know how the surgery went and what his condition is. All I know at this moment is that there was a terrible accident and my father is in the hospital." "Yes, your father was in a car accident. His driver crossed into the oncoming lane and ended up under a truck. He died at the scene, and Senor Alberto was extracted from the wreckage. His legs were literally crushed by the front seat. The surgery was done, but I can't make any forecasts at this point. It's still too early." "Will he be able to walk?" Rogelio asked this question, hoping for a positive answer. "I don't know." "Well, can I see him?" "I think it's not advisable yet." "Senor Gonzalez, let's agree that you will inform me immediately as soon as there's an opportunity to visit him. You can count on me. I will be waiting for your call." The Velasquez family sat around the hospital bed where their father lay. It was a private room equipped with everything necessary for a full recovery. Medical equipment connected to Mr. Alberto by numerous wires displayed all his vital signs, and a nurse frequently entered the room to check on the patient. Alberto was still very weak. His face was pale and covered with multiple bruises, and every word was difficult for him to utter. "How are you?" Lucia broke the silence. She was having the hardest time of all. Besides worrying about her husband, she had taken on all the family responsibilities. She seemed even thinner and more gaunt. As you can see, full of energy and radiating health, Alberto tried to joke, but it only upset Lucia, and she burst into tears right there in the room. "Oh, come on, Mom. Calm down. Dad's alive. Now we just have to wait for him to get back on his feet and recover from the accident. His life is not in danger. You heard what the doctor said, right?" Rogelio said. Lucia nodded, but she couldn't stop the flood of emotions and continued crying, wiping her tears with a handkerchief. "Dad, does it hurt a lot?" Anna finally asked. She had been standing and watching everything. But as a well-mannered daughter, she did not dare interrupt the adults' conversation. Alberto took her hand and pulled her close. "Bend down, daughter. I want to kiss you." Anna leaned towards him, and her father kissed her on the forehead, just as he used to do at home. Suddenly, it became clear to everyone that the worst was over. Their beloved Alberto was here, in the hospital room. But he was alive and would soon return home. They just needed to wait a little longer. How wrong they were. "Velasquez, can you hear me?" I've called your name more than once, but you seem lost in your thoughts. The lecturer approached the young man and looked at him closely. Excuse me, sir. If you're here for knowledge, you must make every effort to obtain it, the man lecturing on the basics of economics said admonishingly. What's wrong with you today? Angela, the girl Rogelio had met on enrollment day, sat next to him and looked at him questioningly. I'll tell you later, the young man whispered. After classes, they walked home together as usual. The young people had already become friends and talked like old acquaintances. Rogelio, how is your father? He's home now. I know that. How is he feeling? No changes so far. He still can't get out of bed. No progress, Rogelio said with despair in his voice. It was clear that he was very worried about the situation. After returning from the hospital, where his father had stayed for about a month, nothing had changed. He remained bedridden, and all attempts to get up had failed. Consult other specialists. Maybe your doctor hasn't encountered such a case before. You have nothing to lose. Search the internet. Find a similar situation and a doctor who has handled such cases. You're right. Rogelio suddenly brightened, and his eyes became clear. He was very pleased with the suggestion. How had he not thought of consulting another specialist who had treated similar diagnoses before? That evening, after the traditional family dinner, he went to his room and immersed himself in the internet. It turned out that his father was not the only one in such a situation. Numerous recommendations were given about where to seek help. There were many specialists and clinics offering their services. But how to choose? Reviews. Of course. I'll rely on patient reviews, Rogelio said out loud. Within minutes of searching, he knew exactly whom to contact. Spanish Dr. Julio Castillo handled such cases. Judging by the reviews, he was quite successful. He had a rehabilitation center where all patients with similar conditions lived and recovered over a long period. Rogelio didn't know what to do with the overwhelming emotions. He understood that this doctor was a chance to save his father. He jumped up from his chair and started pacing the room. There was no one to share the joy with. It was late. On the Velasquez family's favorite terrace, Lucia and Rogelio were sitting at a table arguing about something. There were some papers in front of them. No, your father won't agree to this. You know he never does anything that harms the family, Lucia said. Mom, you know we have no options. Dad has been bedridden for several months. Our doctors can't help him. We must give him a chance. But it's a huge sum. We do have some savings, but it won't be enough. Lucia looked at Rogelio and understood what he was thinking. No, not that. Son, he won't forgive us, she said. They were talking about a family heirloom, a gold necklace adorned with sapphires. It had been passed down the paternal line, and Alberto had carefully preserved it for future generations. Mom, we have no other options. We will sell the necklace, and I'll go to work to support the family. Nonsense. You just got into university. You need to get an education, not work. Mom, the most important thing now is to get Dad back on his feet. We are a family. We have to help him. Lucia calmed down a bit and became lost in thought. It was clear that she was considering various ways out of this difficult situation. Rogelio had already made up his mind. The sun was just rising over the city when Rogelio arrived at the construction site. A residential high-rise building was being erected here, and work had already started early in the morning. The construction crane, resembling a giant bird, effortlessly lifted concrete slabs. Workers in green helmets bustled around the site. Some were transporting sand in wheelbarrows, others stood by the concrete mixer, and still others were loading bricks. The sound of construction machinery, the voices of workers, and the smell of wet cement created a working atmosphere that made one want to dive right in. Every day, something new was created here, contributing to the city's history and laying the foundation for the future. Such a romantic view of construction work appealed to the young man who had never worked anywhere before. Are you Velasquez? A bearded man in a gray uniform approached Rogelio. "Yes, sir." "Come with me," he said, leading Rogelio into the building under construction, where work was in full swing. "Have you already been hired?" he asked. "Yes, I have. I can start working." "Have you ever worked in construction? Do you have any experience?" "No," Rogelio replied. The bearded man looked him over and realized he had asked the question in vain. It was obvious the boy came from a decent family and had no experience in physical labor. Everyone has their circumstances. You must have yours if you came here. "Sir, I need to feed my family." But the man was no longer listening. The sounds of hammers and construction machinery drowned out their conversation. "Here's your new helper," he introduced Rogelio when they reached the construction crew. Several men in the same gray uniform were working there. Rogelio thought their faces looked somehow gray too. "What are you standing there for?" "Take the wheelbarrow and bring the cement," one of them grumbled. The crew was working on one of the floors of the future house, laying bricks for a wall. Rogelio glanced around and found the wheelbarrow. He silently approached it and asked where to get the cement from. "Follow me," the bearded man volunteered to be his guide again. The work and the environment were completely unfamiliar to him. Rogelio spent the whole day transporting bags of cement, and by the end of the day, the romantic notions that had filled his head in the morning were gone. The work was very hard for him. By the end of the day, his legs were giving out, and he was collapsing from exhaustion. "Hey, helper, you must be drunk. Why are you staggering?" This question provoked irritated laughter from all the workers in his crew. Rogelio felt uncomfortable. He didn't know how to respond to such remarks, which made him feel even worse. Finally, the long-awaited bell rang, signaling the end of the workday. The young man sat down on a nearby box. "What, tired, helper? You probably thought this was an office, just a construction one." One of the workers in his crew tried to tease him again, but Rogelio didn't care anymore. He looked through the man, not understanding what he was laughing at. "Son, how are you? You look so tired." Lucia's heart ached when she saw her exhausted son. "I'm fine, Mom. I was working," Rogelio replied firmly, like a man. By that time, they had already sent his father to a rehabilitation center in Europe, hiding the fact that they had sold the family heirloom. "If Alberto could see you now, he wouldn't let you go back to the construction site," his mother wept. "How did Dad start? Straight from the office?" "Remember, Mom. He also came to the construction site first, then got an education, and only after that became an official." "Yes, your father is just like you, determined, firm, and goal-oriented," the woman softened. "I'm going to sleep," Rogelio said. "What about dinner?" Her son just waved his hand. Entering his room, he immediately fell onto his bed and fell asleep at once. The next day followed the same routine: bags of cement, mockery from the workers in his crew, and overwhelming fatigue by the end of the day. All the days started to blend together. The former ease and carefreeness were gone, replaced by a burden of responsibility and extreme fatigue. One day, when the workday was in full swing, a luxury car drove onto the construction site. It was a premium-class vehicle, the same kind his father used to drive for work. A distinguished man in a white shirt got out of the car, and he was immediately handed a white construction helmet. This was the company head, Senor Iglesias. A large entourage of construction managers surrounded him, eager to report on the project's progress. The man paid little attention to their chatter, inspecting the site and drawing his own conclusions. It was clear he was no novice in construction and didn't need their comments. Finally, he decided to go up to the upper floors of the high-rise, where the rough work was being done. He inspected all the crews and finally reached the place where Rogelio's crew was laying bricks. "How's the work going? Are you on schedule?" he asked the foreman. "We should make it, Senor Iglesias," the foreman replied. "We must make it. Otherwise, we'll have to answer to the client," he said kindly, almost fatherly. It was clear he respected the labor of the ordinary workers. At that moment, Rogelio arrived with the wheelbarrow. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. The man immediately noticed he didn't look like a typical worker. Thin and exhausted, it was clear the work was too much for him. What made this young lad take on such hard work, thought Senor Iglesias. He himself had risen from the ranks, so he had an eye for these things. He could easily distinguish an ordinary worker from someone of a different social background. "Isn't it hard for you, kid?" he asked. "I'm getting used to it," Rogelio replied. That was the end of their conversation. The entourage moved on, and Rogelio continued working with his crew. "Andrea, I need the personnel file of a young worker. He recently started at one of our sites." "All right, Mr. Iglesias. I'll prepare everything." The HR employee began rummaging through the personnel files of employees who had recently joined their construction company. "I expect it today," the boss left after giving the order. Not even half an hour had passed when several folders with the personnel files of recently hired employees were laid on the boss's desk. Mr. Iglesias began to carefully study them until he came across the file of Rogelio Velasquez, the very one with whom he had a brief conversation at the construction site. "Is he the son of that Velasquez?" he said aloud. Indeed, everything indicated that the young man named Rogelio, who had joined as a simple worker, was the son of a prominent official. Iglesias also knew about the terrible accident. "I didn't think things were this serious for them," he thought. During his next visit to the construction site where Rogelio worked, he decided to meet with him. "I need to have a serious talk with you." "I'm listening, sir." "No, not here. Let's find somewhere private where we won't be disturbed. Then let's go to our storage room. There's no one there right now. Everyone is at their workstations." He led him to the storage room where they usually changed and had lunch. It was an old, smelly room where the personal belongings of the regular workers were stored. The air was sour with the smell of sweat, and the place was untidy. Men's items were carelessly strewn everywhere. Rogelio cleared a spot for his boss while he sat across from him. "Kid, do you like it here?" Iglesias started the conversation. "I need to feed my family. There's no choice when you don't have an education." "So you're not studying?" "No, I dropped out of university. Education became a luxury we couldn't afford. We needed a lot of money to send my father to a rehabilitation center in Europe." "How is he?" "It's unclear yet. But there is a chance for recovery. It will take a long time." "I understand. And you're here?" "Yes, I'm the only breadwinner left in the family." Iglesias looked carefully at this thin, yet noble boy. He felt a fatherly pity for him. "I have an offer for you. Are you ready to listen?" He continued the conversation in a businesslike manner. "I'm all ears, sir." "You must have experience driving a car." "Of course. I need a driver for long-distance trips. But it's more about transporting documents and money, not cargo. The job is simple but well paid. Enough to support your family and have some left for fun. And you're willing to trust me with this job?" Rogelio said, surprised but with a note of joy. The offer genuinely pleased him. "Yes, I can trust you." The next day, Mr. Iglesias personally took him to the transport base, where the entire fleet of his company was located. There were all kinds of trucks: Mercedes, Volvo, Renault. They stood in neat rows, beautiful, well-maintained, and very expensive. Among them were a few passenger cars. "Do you like it?" "At any rate, it's better than hauling cement to the 10th floor," Rogelio said without taking his eyes off the numerous cars. "One of the passenger cars will be yours. Choose." Iglesias led him closer so that the young man could get a better look at them. "I would prefer the Volvo. I like that brand." "Deal." Iglesias extended his hand, and Rogelio, without hesitation, shook it in agreement. Rogelio sat in the Volvo and was on the road. The journey seemed very long and tiring, as he was not used to it. He had been on the road for almost 3 days and was now returning. Yes, the work was tiring, but not as physically demanding as at the construction site, which Rogelio was very glad about. Mr. Iglesias was indeed a kind man. He sympathized, felt sorry, and pulled him out of that hateful environment. The road was long, giving Rogelio plenty of time to reflect. He thought about everything: his family, his future, Angela. By the way, he had completely forgotten about her. All these family concerns had distanced them. Yet he liked her. Such a small and funny girl. He wanted to protect her, to comfort her, to say a kind word. Unfortunately, their relationship had remained just friendly. A young couple walked along the shore late at night. Against the twilight, only their silhouettes were visible, and their faces were indistinguishable. They walked very slowly and talked about something. It was clear they had common topics of conversation, but they were not yet close enough to be called lovers. "I think about you very often," said Angela, the little girl Rogelio had noticed on enrollment day and started talking to as a student. "You know, I didn't have time for that." For reminiscing, Rogelio replied. He looked at her, and she understood that he had some feelings for her. "I understand. In your situation, anyone would have no time for love affairs." "Oh, what am I saying? Sometimes I say things that I later regret. I speak first, then think." Angela suddenly blushed. Rogelio looked at her funny curls and awkward round glasses. They seemed so dear to him that he hugged her tightly, as one does with very close people. It looked like the beginning of budding feelings. The girl did not resist. She had been waiting for this moment for so long. Rogelio had already settled into his new job, and long-haul trips had become quite routine for him. His mother worried less when he left, but as usual, she eagerly awaited his return. His father's condition was also improving. He had begun to get out of bed on his own. "Are you packing?" Lucia entered Rogelio's room as he was packing for another trip. "Yes, Mom. I'm leaving tomorrow," he replied, not looking up from his travel bag. "Have you gotten used to it, son?" she asked unexpectedly. It was strange because she knew this wasn't his first trip and that Rogelio had long since gotten used to them. "What's wrong, Mom? Are you still worried about me? You'll understand when you have your own children if you'll worry about them or not." Rogelio laughed as his mother pouted like a little girl, as if he had taken away her favorite toy or refused her sweets. "I will worry, of course I will. I'll worry about them and rejoice in their return every time." His mother suddenly shook off her resentment and headed to the kitchen. The sun had not yet risen, and Rogelio was already hurrying to his Volvo. The truck was parked near the house, waiting for its owner. The morning chill invigorated him, and he finally woke up. Lucia followed him. She always saw him off on his trips and blessed him for the road. Suddenly, she threw herself at his neck and burst into tears. "What's wrong, Mom? What happened?" "Could you stay?" she said through her tears, her hair disheveled, and Rogelio tried to smooth it with his hand. "Mom, this is my job. How can I stay? You'll see, I'll return from this trip as usual, and you'll greet me at the door, and a delicious dinner will be waiting for me in the kitchen." Lucia calmed down a bit and let him go. Senor Iglesias Velasquez did not return from his trip. He was supposed to arrive yesterday afternoon. One of the company managers entered the boss's office. "Have you tried to contact him?" "Of course, but he's not answering." "Track him by geolocation." "We'll do that," the manager said, then left. But they couldn't track him or his truck. The geolocation was turned off. It was as if he had disappeared along with the vehicle, vanished into thin air. "We'll declare a search," decided Senor Iglesias. The boy couldn't have disappeared without a trace. Maybe he just decided to take all the money for himself? "It's a considerable sum," one of the employees suggested. "I don't believe that for a second," Iglesias replied firmly. The man couldn't believe that the young man would resort to theft, although he did need the money. But rumors were rampant. Most people thought Rogelio had taken the truck and the money and was now living a carefree life. Few believed that something had happened to the boy. Even the police adhered to the version that Rogelio was a thief who needed to be found and jailed for embezzling company funds. Lucia and Anna sat at the table, each lost in their thoughts. Before them was lunch, which had long gone cold. "How are we going to live without our Rogelio?" the mother suddenly broke the heavy silence. "Alberto is in Europe, and our son is missing. I don't know how to go on." "Mom, calm down. Dad is fine. Rogelio will be found too. You don't believe he could have stolen the money and run away, do you?" Anna reasoned in a very grown-up manner. "I don't know what to think anymore. Yes, even if he did, the main thing is that he is alive." "Don't you dare say that. Do you really think our Rogelio is capable of such a thing? After everything Senor Iglesias has done for him? Don't even think about it." Anna's words were those of an adult. And Lucia suddenly realized that Anna had become her support and pillar. Although it was she, the mother, who should be taking care of her daughter now more than ever. She approached her daughter and hugged her tightly. The roadside cafe smelled of rancid oil, which had already been used to fry a dozen steaks. Angela took out her phone from her bag and approached the waiter who was serving customers. "Excuse me, have you seen this person?" He looked carefully at the person in the phone and shook his head. "Sorry," the girl replied with a note of bitterness and headed for the exit. This was the 10th cafe where she had tried to find any information about Rogelio. But all in vain. No one had seen him. "I will keep looking," she said loudly as she left the cafe. She had been searching for Rogelio since he disappeared. Angela had been hitchhiking along the route that had been Rogelio's last. But now she needed to return home, and she walked to the roadside to find a ride. A small truck stopped. The kind used by local farmers. "Need a ride?" asked the middle-aged man behind the wheel. "Yes, I would be very grateful." "Aren't you afraid to get into strangers' cars?" the driver asked right after she got into the passenger seat. "No, I don't have time for such nonsense. I'm looking for someone," the girl responded sharply, putting the man in his place. "You're brave, little one," the driver exclaimed. "A person went missing almost a month ago, and the police haven't moved an inch in their search. A person is missing, and no one cares. Well, it must be someone special for you to embark on such dangerous journeys for a young girl." The man looked closely at the girl. Angela blushed but said nothing. "Listen, are you in a hurry? I need to stop by a friend's place on the way." "No, I'm not in a hurry." "Great." A few kilometers later, the truck turned into a small farm. In a pen, various cows were grazing, chewing on the hay lying right under their feet. And in a small pond behind the pen, numerous ducks were swimming. The man from the truck went about his business, and Angela got out of the truck to get a closer look at the animals. She had never been on a farm, so she was very curious. A man was working nearby. He was cutting grass, which would later become feed for the cows. Angela thought his silhouette looked familiar. She got closer and couldn't believe her eyes. It was Rogelio. The same Rogelio who had disappeared almost a month ago and whom she had been searching for all this time. She believed he was alive. Alberto Velasquez was still in Europe, while Lucia and Anna were struggling with the absence of father and son. In phone conversations, she never mentioned Rogelio to her husband. She joked that he was out with his girlfriend or preparing for exams. But lying was becoming increasingly difficult. The burden of worries weighed heavily on her fragile shoulders, along with the problem of supporting the family. Rogelio had managed to earn some money on his long-haul trips, but the savings were dwindling by the day. "I believe my boy is alive. God won't abandon him," she said, never stopping her prayers for her son. It was already late in the evening when someone knocked on the Velasquez's door. Lucia was preparing for bed and wasn't expecting anyone. Who could it be, she wondered. She threw a sweater over her nightgown and approached the front door. "Who is it?" she asked timidly. "Mom, it's me, Rogelio," she heard the familiar voice. Lucia's legs felt weak. She couldn't move. After a moment, she gathered herself and opened the door. There stood her Rogelio. He was a bit thinner and scruffier, but it was her son, whom she had been waiting for daily, believing he would return. I believed you were alive. Son, she exclaimed. Rogelio entered the house, and Angela followed behind him. Lucia looked at her questioningly. Mom, she found me. Lucia fell to her feet, but Rogelio quickly lifted her and hugged her. I'll tell you everything, Senor Iglesias. Just don't doubt me, Rogelio said. He was sitting in his boss's office, who was carefully observing him. From his appearance, he understood that the boy had been through a tough situation and was waiting for an explanation. He had no thoughts that Rogelio could be treacherous. As it turned out, Rogelio had been attacked. A driver had stopped him on the highway, claiming he needed help with car repairs. Rogelio kindly agreed to help, and the driver's accomplice knocked him out. They stole the truck and left Rogelio on the roadside. They clearly had inside information, knowing Rogelio would be transporting not only documents but a large sum of money that day. A local farmer, passing by, found him. Rogelio didn't know how to return and doubted if anyone would believe he had been attacked. So he decided to stay with the farmer for a while. That's where Angela found him. Senor Iglesias listened to his story. He had no reason not to believe him. Besides, Rogelio named the farm and the farmer he had been working for. But where was his Volvo? They needed to contact the police. Rogelio remembered what the attackers looked like, so they were quickly identified through police databases. The missing truck was found in no time. Son, I think trucking isn't for you, Iglesias said during one of their conversations. You're too well-mannered. The road needs tough guys. I'll try you in the office. I need managers. You're a smart guy. I think you'll manage. Senor Iglesias was right. Rogelio found his place and deftly handled his new duties. Senor Iglesias, my father is returning from Europe tomorrow, Rogelio happily informed his boss. Is he coming alone? Yes, on his own 2 feet. I'd like to meet him. I have great respect for Senor Alberto Velasquez. Of course, I'd be glad. You've done so much for me. The next day, the entire Velasquez family was at the airport. They stood by the windows, waiting for his plane to land. The flight had been announced, and the plane was due to land any minute. There it was. The white liner had already deployed the ramp. Their hearts pounded wildly. Dad! Anna shouted. She was the first to see her father. Alberto descended and stood by the plane for a moment. He had been in Europe for 6 months. He, like all his loved ones, was overwhelmed with immense joy. Finally, he headed towards the airport building. Anna ran to meet him, and they climbed the escalator together, where 3 more people awaited them. Dad! Alberto! Senor Velasquez, they called out in unison. Alberto was already embracing his loved ones. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He still couldn't believe he was home. On his own 2 feet. Senor Alberto, I'm very glad to see you well. Thank you for your son. Alberto didn't yet know why Iglesias was thanking him. He would soon learn many things that had been carefully hidden from him to not hinder his recovery. 5 years had passed. Rogelio still worked for Senor Iglesias. He was no longer the boy from years ago. He was now a respectable young man, a leading manager at a construction company. Lucia and Anna managed the household, and Alberto worked part-time at another construction firm. When he learned about the sale of the family heirloom, he was very upset. But he understood it had been done for his benefit. Dad, I have news for you. Please, don't get upset, his son said when he returned home at the end of the workday. More news? I've had so much lately that I don't know what to expect, the man chuckled. I'm quitting, Rogelio said happily. Should I be happy or worried? Did you get fired? What did you do? No, I quit. Dad, please sit down. Alberto obediently sat in a chair, not taking his eyes off his joyful son. Dad, I'm starting my own construction company. Alberto continued to stare at him, not understanding what was happening. I've picked an office, gathered a team of young, but skilled people. Do you want to lead the firm? No, son. Now it's your time. Take the reins. You can do it. You've already proven that to us, his father said and hugged him. That's not all. Alberto frowned, but his son's spreading smile calmed him. Dad, I want to propose to Angela. I'm very nervous, I need your advice. And then father and son had a heart-to-heart talk about love, the future, and the past. Faith in oneself, in one's abilities, and the support of loved ones can create great things. A miracle? No, we create our own miracles. The main thing is to have truly close people by your side. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.